Hey y'all, my name is Giselle Valenzuela Aldridge. I am the founder and principal consultant at Colossians Consulting. And at Colossians, we specialize in providing data analytics, visualization, and data science solutions to e-commerce companies. Based out of Austin, Texas. In my spare time, I should also mention that I am one of the community leaders at AnitaB.org Austin. And you are here to watch the DIY Pay Equity talk, or do-it-yourself Pay Equity. Now, if it turns out that you're in the wrong room, you didn't mean to be here, I should mention that you should stick around because you're going to end up making more money in your career as a result. Who doesn't want that, right? So before I get into the content, I should mention that, or I should share with you the intentions behind this talk. So I am used to attending a good number of diversity and inclusion talks and panels. And unfortunately, most of the time when I walk out of these events, I come out feeling very powerless and frustrated, or frustrated at the fact that they made me feel powerless, whichever way you want to look at it. And the reason that is because I usually get one or two scenarios coming out of these talks. They do a very good job of presenting the problem. However, the solution part is where I struggle. So a number of diversity and inclusion talks, they tend to either provide no solutions, thereby giving this air of, oh no, there's no solution to this problem. Or the other scenario is that I'll get solutions that can only be enacted by institutions that I really have no control over, like the government or companies in that area. I guess in your case it would be all the companies in the UK. I don't know about you, but I don't feel as though I have a whole lot of influence over either of these entities. So I actually like to focus on solutions that I can enact myself and that folks like you can enact yourselves. And so you're not going to come out of this talk feeling frustrated or powerless. You're going to come out feeling hopeful and empowered because you're going to get some tools and strategies from this talk that you can use yourself. I use these myself to close a 30% pay gap that I discovered during my career. And you can do the same. All right, so this is a picture of me when I was about to graduate from university. I'm going to say when, with my computer science degree. And I can't tell you exactly what I was thinking about here. I definitely know one thing that I wasn't thinking about here, and that is salary negotiation. See, I came into tech thinking that tech is a meritocracy, right? If I just worked hard, if I distinguished myself within my field, then my employer would just automatically compensate me financially for it without having to be asked. Fast forward 10 years later, I'm a senior developer at a Fortune 500 company, and that's the point in time where I realized that tech is not a meritocracy. It's actually a business. And in business, employers generally want to pay as little as possible for their employees. Now, while it took me a while to realize this, I soon found out that other engineers were negotiating pay since day one. So I was shocked at that point in time in my career to find out that I was getting paid $10,000 less a year than other senior developers at that same company within the same geographical area. Now, in pounds, that would be equivalent to about 8,000 pounds per year. At that point in time, I discovered that I had a pay gap. So what is a pay gap? Essentially, it's just the difference between your market value and your actual pay. And your market value can be calculated using three major factors. One, and the most important one in my opinion, is your current skill set and the demand for that skill set. Number two would be your years of experience in tech. And number three would be your educational level, so bachelor's, master's, PhD. So how does a pay gap start? Well, how did I discover my own pay gap? I discovered my pay gap when a friend of mine from that company, who shall remain nameless, came to me and said, basically, you're not making as much as everyone else, this is how much more everyone else is making. And I won't say how this person knew. However, after more research that I did on my own, I actually realized that my pay gap was much bigger than the $10,000. It was actually 30%. I was actually making 30% less than what I was supposed to be making in accordance with my market value at the time. But here's how other women do when it comes to salary negotiation. And I should mention here that the data source that I'm using, Hire.com, if you're not familiar with them, they are like an Indeed for just tech jobs. They only do tech jobs. And unfortunately, they did not provide me with, or anyone really, with numbers that span across ethnicities. They only provided information regarding white women in particular. So I think that would have been a much richer conversation had we had more information there. But this is what I found on their report, and this is what I'm sharing with you. So according to Hire.com, white women with 4 years or less experience ask for more money than their white male counterparts, and they're getting it. So what can we glean from this? So what we can glean from this is that junior level women are not only aware of their market value, not only are they not afraid to ask for their market value, but they're actually asking for more than that, and they are getting it. So this is very positive information, right? These women are already doing, as junior level women, more than I did for a good part of my career. But here's the bad news. So also according to Hire.com, at 6 or more years of experience, white women begin to ask for less than their white male counterparts, and they are getting the lesser salary. So what can we glean from this? Most importantly, what we can glean from this information is that no one will correct you if you sell yourself short, right? If you agree to a particular salary and it's low, and the employer actually knows it's low, they're not going to correct you and say, hey, maybe you should, negotiate for more. And my career is certainly proof of that, and certainly that's what Hire is seeing as well. Now, the fact that there is a ceasing of negotiating, salary negotiation at the mid-career level, Hire doesn't really speculate on that. I have my own theories on why that might be, but that'll have to wait for the Q&A. So here are some other ways that, besides non-negotiation, that a pay gap can open or widen over time. So according to Forbes, staying at the same company for over 2 years on average leads to more gap widening. Now, why is that? So companies in general tend to give a single-digit percentage annual raise on non-promotion years. So in the UK, I'm told that's between 3 and 8%, which is pretty good because in the US, it's actually 2 to 3%. So y'all are lucky. But once you start racking up too many of these years, you're creating an environment where your market value will far outpace your 3 to 8% annual raise. And now I can certainly blame a lot of this phenomenon for why my pay gap was so large, that and salary non-negotiation, but I've spent 10 years of my career at virtually the same company. So you can see that I racked up a good number of 2 to 3% years that way. So my advice to you is basically if you are at a company for 3 years and no one from management has approached you and said, hey, we see that your career is blossoming, we want you to grow it here. Let's talk about what this is going to look like. If no one is having that conversation with you within the first 3 years, then you need to move on because your career is not going to flourish there. So I mentioned promotions in the last slide, but the truth is that even with a promotion, that may not close the gap for you. And here's why. So a number of companies have policies within HR that claim that you can't make more than 10% of your current salary post-promotion. So let's just attach some numbers so that you get an idea of what this looks like. Because this actually happened to me. I got a promotion, and let's say theoretically that I was making $80,000 a year prior to the promotion, and the actual role that I was promoted into started at $100,000 a year. My expectation post-promotion was to make $100,000 a year at that point. However, I was told that there was a 10% cap on what I can make post-promotion, so I ended up making $88,000 a year instead. And then there's the issue of what if you interview and your future employer asks you, hey, what do you currently make at your current job? And let's say you answered honestly, because some people don't. The issue with answering that question at all is the fact that if they like you and they want to hire you, the fact is that they are only going to offer you 10 to 15% more than what you told them you make. So my general advice because I do some career coaching on the side now, my general advice to people is don't ever answer the question. Always bring the conversation back around to what does this position actually pay? Because they do have a budget for this position and they do understand what the top amount of salary it is that they're willing to offer for this position. So how do you figure out your market value? Because that's really the crux of this conversation, right? Because if you can't figure out your market value, then you can't figure out things like, are you experiencing a pay gap or not? Well, I'm going to first off stress that you should try to figure out your market value at least once a year. This is not something you're going to want to do once or twice in your career. Do it once a year, and that way you can keep track of what your skills are actually worth. And when it comes time for you to start interviewing or ask for a pay raise or anything like that, then you have this information in your back pocket. Now, for anything that I'm researching, and that includes market value, I always try to find as many data sources across as many data points across as many data sources as possible. And so that way you get a good amount of data points, and then you can see what patterns or trends emerge from all of your data points that you've collected. Now, I'm going to go over several data sources that you can look at for your market value research. And we're going to start with websites. Now, I get asked for websites a lot. And I think it's just because it's easy information. It's easy to get to. You just punch in some numbers, and it gives you back the information that you're looking for. But I'll be honest, I don't really love websites as a data source, except as a lower bound. So when you do this research and use websites, I would say just try not to accept anything at below where these websites indicate that you should be making, because they do tend to be lower numbers than what I see in the marketplace. Now, the reason that I think that this is because the biggest factor in figuring out your market value is your skill set and the demand for that skill set. How much are employers willing to pay you if you have a certain skill set? And the fact of the matter is, these websites don't do a very good job of tracking that value. So that's why I say use it as a lower bound, if anything. So this is actually my favorite data source, recruiters. And really not just any recruiter, but the right recruiter. So how do you identify the right recruiter? Has anybody here worked with recruiters before? Raise your hands. Okay. About half of you. So I would say you want to look for a recruiter that's been a tech recruiter for 10 years or more. Because it turns out that the very unscrupulous ones wash out within the first 5 years or so. And then the other thing that I like about the right recruiter is that they tend to be very transparent about hourly rates. So I can literally hand my resume to a right recruiter, and that person will come back to me and say, you can make X number of dollars an hour based on the skills that I see on your resume. Okay, so this is a little controversial. Asking friends or coworkers, in other words, their salary and that sort of conversation. So I'm sure that, how many people feel comfortable having this conversation with their friends and coworkers? See, yeah, not that many. And I was part of the group that was not comfortable at all for a very long time with this conversation. But here's the thing about what they call salary transparency, right? The companies that exhibit the most salary transparency are the ones that have the least incidence of pay gaps and the smallest pay gaps as well. So if you want to check out, there's a company called Buffer, B-U-F-F-R, and they have their salary, literally, they have their salaries online for everyone to see. Now, they don't have names attached to the salaries, but I think they have like the title attached to each salary. So you can literally see what everybody makes at Buffer. Now, I can guarantee you there's probably no pay gaps at Buffer because everybody making, who's at the same level is going to be making around the same amount of money. Now, before you run off and start talking to your coworkers right away about how much they make, I should add a caveat to this. So I do know of companies that have literally fired their employees for having this conversation. And as unjustified and wrong as that might be, it does happen. The thing that I would tell you in order to avoid being a collateral damage to something like that is to check your employee handbook. In all honesty, that's where all of the company's secrets go to die anyways. So you should be pretty familiar with the handbook anyways. I even give people the tip of when they're interviewing, ask for the handbook. You can tell so much about a company just by reading their handbook. It's boring, don't get me wrong, but it's where all the skeletons go. All right, so another technique that I would use is attributed to Melissa Peak at Talent Path. And she says that you can ask someone one rung up from you. So this would be, if you're an individual contributor, it would be a manager. If you're a manager, it would be a director. Basically, you would approach this person, the conversation would go something like, hey, how much do you think that I would make if I were reporting to you? This doesn't have to be somebody that you work with at your company, but just somebody in your network that you trust that would actually do a little bit of research and get back to you on that if they have to do so. And if you don't have folks like that in your network, I can't overstate the power of networking. I really can't. You're going to need to upgrade your network game. And if you live, how many of you live here in London? Oh, okay. So there is a great group here called AnitaB.org London, shameless plug. And I would highly recommend that you join that group. It's free events, free membership. I would highly recommend doing that just because, you know, being an only lonely woman or minority inside of any company or team, it's very isolating. And joining a group like this can really give you the support network that you need, that you maybe didn't even know you needed in your career to move forward. And so many people get opportunities that you wouldn't even dream of because of their network. It's not even because they, you know, got promoted within their job to some crazy position. I'm telling you from experience, your network is really very important. Okay, so let's say that you went ahead and you did your market value research, you decided, hey, I have a pay gap, how can I close it? Well, the first obvious question is, do you develop where you are? And the first answer, you know, your obvious answer should be, yes, I should try that. So the first conversation you want to have is going to be with either your HR or your management, whatever your policy in your workplace is. And the conversation that you're going to have with them is going to go something like, hey, I've done some market value research. I have realized that my market value has far exceeded my actual pay. Who do I talk to about a market adjustment? And please, if you don't get anything else out of this talk, market adjustment, that is a term that you need to remember. Because what it signals to the other person across from you is that, hey, I'm not going to get into a circular conversation around how many raises it's going to take for me to close my gap. I'm not going to get into any circular conversations around how can I earn a promotion to close my gap. What you're telling them is that your salary needs to be corrected to what they consider to be the market rate for your position. Now, you may disagree with them on what that market rate is, but at the very least, it'll get you to a better situation than what you started with. Now, let's say that conversation didn't go well, and they did not want to give you a market adjustment. So your next obvious question to yourself is going to be, do you go elsewhere? Now, you could always, you could always get yourself another full-time position, at which point I would advocate the very same thing that you heard from Miko Yuk at this keynote this morning. That's just coincidental. Basically, that we women tend to only apply for jobs that we qualify for 100% of the requirements of, whereas men tend to apply to the jobs even if they only qualify for 60% of the job requirements. Now, the reason that I'm telling you this is because a lot of times these other jobs where they have a lot of requirements, they tend to pay more. And so if let's say one of you had 80% of the requirements and a gentleman had only 60% of the requirements and you didn't apply and he did, the obvious math there is that he stands a much better chance of getting that job than you. So we got to change our outlook and our way of looking at our mindset around looking at jobs and which jobs to apply for. Now, this is the really interesting part for me, is contracting. So has anyone here contracted before? One person. Okay, so I'm in the right crowd. Please consider contracting. It can be incredibly lucrative. So this is what closed the pay gap for me. In fact, I don't know that if I ever have to go back to work, if I can't work for myself, I'll ever do anything but contract at this point. It's incredibly lucrative. There is a whole lot of respect that gets attached to being a contractor as well. It's people that don't, things that people don't talk about, but it's just true. So please consider contracting. All right. So once you've closed your gap by hopefully getting your market adjustment or getting a new job, if that didn't work out, how do you increase your market value over time? You want to continue to build up your market value. So how do you do that? So essentially, you're going to want to acquire skills continuously acquire skills that are in high demand. So how do I do that? So I like to look at job descriptions for the kind of roles that I've had in the past. So in my case, I would be like database developer or SQL developer, and I'll look at the requirements. And if I look at enough of them, I'll start to get a list together of skills that I don't have that employers are looking for. And then I call up the right recruiter and I say, hey, I'm thinking about picking up XYZ skill set. How much money can I make per hour doing XYZ skill set? And that's how I know if there's going to be enough return on investment for me to pick up these skills. Because let's face it, we're doing this in our spare time, right? So you got to be really discerning about which skills you pick up or which skills you try to pick up and use up your time to do. All right. And then finally, I want to stress that certifications are something that you need to consider. How many folks here have certifications, like technological certifications, technical? Okay, so please take a look at the different certifications that are out there. Now, I looked at Global Knowledge's top 20, I think, IT certifications for 2019. And by top, they mean top paying. So the people that get these certifications are supposed to be getting paid this amount of money. Now, I didn't find a UK equivalent. They have not done anything like that in the UK, nor has any other company. But according to Global Knowledge, a Google Cloud Platform Professional Cloud Architect cert holder can make about $140,000 a year. And that's equivalent to about 110,000 pounds a year. Now, I can't say for sure that the supply and demand is the same in the UK as it is in the US, but if you talk to the right recruiters and you start asking them which certifications they find are the most lucrative, they should be able to give you those kinds of answers. And finally, if there are any tactics that you liked during this talk, I hope that you can take 3 of your underrepresented in tech friends and you can share those tactics with them. And then I think we can scale out from here. I mean, we can make a huge dent in the pay inequity situation by helping each other out. Thank you.